For 8 long months, a lonely nurse whispered stories to a Kumio Mouse millionaire. Then one day he woke up and begged her to stop because her voice haunted every nightmare he'd ever had. Not everyone you love needs you, but love means walking through pain without asking to be seen. And this is where everything began to unravel. You won't believe how their story ends. The ICU. On night shift is a place without time, without seasons, without witnesses, only the steady beeping of machines. Remains not proof of life, but of life not yet lost within that sterile white silence. Elenina sat as she did every night on the old wooden chair beside bed number 9. He was still there, Adrian. Lancaster tech millionaire icon of the creative world was now just a motionless body beneath the cold lights. No family, no friends, no one but Alina. She never called him by name the way the doctors did, distant and clinical to her. Adrienne was the only one still listening. There was a time I stood on a bridge railing, she whispered, eyes drifting to the blank ceiling, as if the story wasn't meant for anyone, or maybe just for someone who couldn't answer, not because I wanted to die, but because there was no one left to talk to. Her voice was steady, unshaken, but there was something terrifying about how calmly such words could be spoken. Alina didn't need comfort. She had survived that night alone. Just as she sat here now, telling stories to someone who might no longer feel anything, no response, not even a flicker of an eyelid. Still, she spoke every day, as if her voice was the only thread keeping her from falling apart, or maybe it's keeping someone else from vanishing completely. When I was little, I believed in healing light, that if you were kind to someone long enough, they'd eventually be kind in return. She gave a faint laugh, half mocking. So I became a nurse, and the first person I ever cared for couldn't even say thank you. She glanced at him. Adrian's eyes were shut. Tight the monitor pulsed on. I suppose you're used to not needing to thank anyone, huh? People like you always above it all, above everyone, above emotions. No answer, only a faint hiss from the ventilator line, like a sigh from a soulless machine. Alina exhaled. She stood, picked up her coat, moving gently, as if afraid to disturb the deep sleep before leaving the room. She turned back, her brown eyes landing on that still face one more time, perhaps for the 1000th time. Just once, just one day. I want someone to say, I hear you. She whispered, and then she walked away. The dim light in the room caught a glimmer, not from a machine, but from the corner of Adrian's left eye. A single tear slid down his cold cheek. Number alarms, no witnesses, just a small detail easily missed. Or maybe not, but it happened 3 days after the night Alina left early. I see room 9 remained steeped in that same cold, detached stillness, like a world sealed off from the flow of time. Everything was exactly as it had been, the crisp white bed, the monitors blinking so with vital signs, the 4 lines, the ventilator, but one thing had changed. Adrian Lancaster had opened his eyes. No one witnessed the moment, no nurse, no doctor, just a night. Janitor passing by who caught a glimpse of those clouded eyes blinking for the first time in 8 months. News of Adrian waking up spread like fire to dry paper. The press wasn't allowed in the hospital. Locked down all information, but Lena knew, and she ran. Her heart pounded like every night of waiting. Every whispered story beside his bed, every silent tear had finally been answered. She pushed open the door. Adrian was sitting up, propped against the pillows. Eyes open, their gaze unfocused and lost, as if his soul hadn't yet caught up with his body. He turned his head at the sound of footsteps. His eyes met hers. Adrian. Lena breathed barely a whisper. She stepped forward like a child running toward her very first miracle. She took his hand. It was weak but warm. Can you hear me? It's me. Alina, I'd been here. A trembling smile, wet with tears, began to form on her lips, but before it could bloom, Adrian jerked his hand away. His eyes dulled just moments before suddenly widened, filled with something no one expected. Primal fear. He struggled to speak, throat-dry voice like rusted metal scraping against skin. Please. He gasped, eyes locked on her like she was something terrifying. Please don't make me listen anymore. Alina froze, confused in disbelief. What are you saying? She stepped back, voice cracking. I was the one who stayed for 8 months. I told you stories every day, every single day. Adrian shook his head, his hand clutched the bedsheet, knuckles white. "I heard that voice," he muttered, squeezing his eyes shut, almost crying out in the dark over the story wouldn't stop. It never stopped. I thought I was dead. Thought it was the voice of hell. The last sentence nearly knocked Alina to her knees. She gripped the bed rail to steady herself. Her initial joy strangled into something gray and cold. "No, Adrian," she whispered, almost begging. I just wanted you to live." He didn't answer. He looked at her, but as if he was seeing through her into something far more terrifying than death, something that haunted him through the coma, and it had her voice. There was a space between them now. No one reached for the other. No one stepped forward. Alina turned away. Her steps faltered, like someone yanked out of a dream. She'd poured her whole soul into. She didn't cry. She had no tears left. Maybe those were spent on someone who never truly hurt her and now never wanted to again. When the door closed behind her, Adrian collapsed back into the pillows, sweat soaking his brow. Inside his fractured memory, a voice echoed. I stood on a bridge railing, not because I wanted to die, but because there was no one left to talk to. He covered his ears, but the voice remained no longer a gentle story, but a chain, a bell, tolling from the abyss. If you woke from an 8-month coma, and the only voice you remembered filled you with terror, was it love, or was it a prison? The nightmare didn't end when Adrian opened his eyes. It simply changed shape from fractured images buried in unconsciousness to sharp pieces falling into a conscious, fragile mind. 3 days had passed since he woke, and not once had he truly slept. He didn't dare. Every time he closed his eyes, that voice returned, a woman's voice, echoing, whispering stories in the dark. Not gentle, not comforting, but haunting, like screams torn from the depths of hell. And what drove him, maddest of all, it was the voice of the nurse named Elena. He remembered her eyes vividly the moment she walked in, brimming with wet hope. Then the moment she spoke, and his memory shattered. Dr. Richardson, Adrian's attending physician since the early days of his coma, entered for the morning psych evaluation. A man calm to the point of coldness, but always perfectly professional. Your neurological condition is surprisingly stable. It's Adrian, but I can tell you're still agitated. Would you be open to a memory recall session? He asked. Adrian nodded dryly. I need to know. I need to make sure I'm not losing my mind. The doctor nodded and signaled his assistant to start the recording. Over the past 8 months, we recorded some audio samples for subconscious response studies, mostly the voice of your attending nurse, Elena. Adrian's chest tightened the moment he heard her name. The audio began soft, calm, but to Adrian, it was like fingernails screeching across glass, you know. Elena's voice played through the speaker, clear, rounded. Gentle, they say. People dream in comas. If that's true, I hope there's a small corner in yours where I exist. Adrian jolted upright. Stop it, he whispered, but before the doctor could act. Voice, not comfort. Watch out. Don't. Adrian froze. His whole body turned cold. His breath fractured. A flash ripped through his mind. The rain-slick highway. The wheels slipping, the barrier approaching, and that scream like fate itself had just pulled the trigger. He gripped the edge of the bed. That voice, Adrian whispered, that was the voice right before my car hit the guardrail, the last thing I heard before the coma. The doctor looked startled, whose voice Elena's. The air thickened, as if something unseen had just died in the room. Dr. Richardson flipped through the records. No mention of Elena at the accident scene, no reason for her to be there, but the voice, it matched chillingly. Adrian collapsed, hands over his ears. I don't understand. She couldn't have been there, but her voice, it was in my head before I even knew her name. The doctor studied him. Cautious. Some threads between memory and emotion can't be mapped by science. Some voices sink so deep into the subconscious they have become part of the accident of life and of death. Adrian laughed, a crooked, dry sound. If she really saved me, he murmured, then why do I feel trapped inside that voice that night? Adrian stood before the mirror in the rehab room. He stared at himself, this thin, drained version of a man, and remembered everything. The rain, the scream, the crash, and then the whisper that lasted 8 months. One question echoed relentlessly in his mind. Did she save me or push me over the edge? And at that same moment, In a quiet corner of the hospital, Alina still passed by room 9 every night. She never went in, never spoke. She just looked as if waiting for an answer that would never come. Elenina had taken 3 days off, not because she was tired not to let go. She just needed to disappear for a while to see if in her absence he would fall apart on the first day. She thought she'd feel empty, regretful, or at least restless, but all Alina felt was a quiet kind of relief she didn't have to tell stories to. Someone who never responded, didn't have to check vitals for a man. Who'd never smiled, didn't have to wonder if the love she gave was being thrown into a void, and then on the 3rd day she returned not to work, just passing through like a stranger. The hallway on the 6th floor, the ICU wing, had never looked as bright as it did today. Sunlight poured through spotless glass. Casting soft golden streaks across the stone floor, Alina stood behind a large pane of glass, clutching a folder she pretended to need. Her eyes fixed on the familiar room 9 inside. Adrian sat upright, dressed in a fresh hospital gown, his hair trimmed neatly his face. No longer pale, he was talking to a younger nurse. She laughed at something Adrian said, and then he smiled. Alina froze. That smile wasn't forced, it wasn't scared, it wasn't twisted like the last time he saw her. It was real gentle, alive, almost happy. So he could smile after all, just not for her. Alina turned her face away, but her feet wouldn't move. Something inside her was slipping away piece by piece. Not painful enough to cry, just a quiet hollowing, the kind of ache that no one sees but lingers like a wound that won't heal maybe. I was just talking to a corpse for 8 months, she thought, eyes still staring at the space beyond the glass. She wasn't jealous, she wasn't angry, it was just every story, every sleepless night. Every scar she thought was a bond turned out to be a cheap necklace that snapped the moment it was taken off. Then Adrian looked toward the window for a brief second. His gaze seemed to settle where Alina stood, but only for a second. He turned back to the new nurse, still smiling, no flicker of memory. No trace of longing, just a patient learning to live again. Without the past, without her, Alina slowly turned away. 3 days and he had recovered. 3 days and the first smile in 8 months was for someone else maybe. It was never needed. Just a background noise, a lullaby for someone who'd stopped hearing. She walked out of the hallway without a sound that night. Alina sat in her small apartment, no lights, no music. She opened an old notebook once used for tracking vitals, now filled with thoughts she never dared speak aloud. You woke up and everything was better. When I wasn't there, maybe my role is over. The page trembled slightly beneath the desk lamp. I used to believe that if love was true, it would be remembered, but maybe some loves exist only to witness, not to stay. Alina closed the notebook, set it gently on the shelf outside the window. Black cat crossed the rooftop across the street. Wind slipped through the cracks in the door, carrying the sound of a peaceful night. The kind of peace that didn't need her to be part of it. Some pain doesn't disappear, it simply changes shape quietly. Find shelter in another memory. Adrian couldn't name what he was feeling. He only knew that each night, awake or exhausted, a voice played on repeat in his mind, not Elena's voice, but his mother's. On the 5th morning after waking, Adrian agreed to a memory therapy session with Dr. Richardson. The room was dimly lit, just enough to reveal the exhaustion on his face, and for the first time he chose to speak about the past. I still remember, he began, eyes fixed on the space ahead, not on the doctor. Right before the car spun out, my mother screamed. How did she scream? The doctor asked gently, as if afraid to crack something already fractured. I couldn't make out the words. Adrian shook his head. Just the scream, loud, violent. It was that last thing I heard, and then everything went dark. He shuddered, as if the crash still lived in his body, as if the sound of crushing metal had never left his ears. But what terrified him most wasn't the accident itself. It was the overlap. I thought Elena scared me, but now I'm not sure. My mother's voice and hers, they're nearly the same, not identical, but when they speak in the same rhythm, the same tone, it wakes. Something I thought I'd buried. The doctor said nothing, neither to confirm nor deny. Some wounds live outside the reach of scans and diagnosis. Some truths have no medical name at that same moment. Alina was in the archives, rarely visited by anyone outside legal or administrative staff. She needed a reason to come back, not to see Adrian, but to understand why she was still caught in him. Even after trying to walk away, she opened Adrian Lancaster's file beneath the crash scene photos. One detail stood out: time of accident, 10:45 p. Date Alina froze, that date the day her mother died, her hands trembled. No, no, it can't be. She ran to the death records. Pulled her mother's file brought in after a severe car accident, deceased before arrival December
25th, time 45 p.m., same time.
Day, same stretch of highway, to strangers, to different accidents, but the same moment, the same scream piercing through a rain-soaked night. Lena staggered back, the archive room spun around her. Her breath tangled the scream. It was my mother's. It wasn't Alina who haunted Adrian. It was her. A strange thread appeared, Adrian haunted by the final scream before the coma. The voice of a mother, and Alina, unknowingly, had echoed that same cadence, that same rhythm for 8 months straight. She had become the echo of a soul Adrian couldn't let go, to memories, 2 deaths, 1 moment, a fracture. No one could mend that. Afternoon, Alina stepped into Dr. Richardson's office and placed a folder on his desk. You need to see this about Adrian. Me, about my mother. He opened it. His usually calm expression tightened slightly. He'd never believed in fate, but some numbers chilled even him. A long silence followed. Alina spoke again. My voice frightens him because I echoed the thing that took his. Mother, buddy, he's the mirror of the moment I lost mine. You're saying your pain overlaps. No, I'm saying we are each other's pain. She didn't cry, but something in her eyes had broken, not because of Adrian, but because of the truth. They weren't hurt by each other. They were the unhealed wounds of themselves, locked together like 2 interlaced keys that couldn't be sundone. Night fell. Adrian stood outside the nurse's station watching Alina walk away. He didn't call out, didn't reach for her. He just watched. Some pieces of memory aren't meant to complete a picture. They exist only to show that some things can never be put back together without hurting them. Everything went quiet after that fateful afternoon. Alina no longer came to the hospital. Adrian no longer asked for her, but the words left unsaid still circled like a wound that hadn't closed. Painful but bloodless, breathing but not alive. 1 week passed, then 2. The doctor said Adrian was recovering well. He attended physical therapy, daily aid on schedule, healed at a pace that bordered on miraculous, but late at night, when the windows let in the early summer wind, he still couldn't sleep because the voice remained not in sound, but in absence. Then one day, Adrian entered the therapy room where Dr. Richardson was already waiting, but he wasn't alone. Alina had returned. She sat quietly in the chair across the table, a light brown coat, hair neatly tied back, face calm, no longer the nurse standing behind the glass, but a woman who had walked through pain and survived. Dr. Richardson nodded. No therapy today, just conversation. He stepped out, leaving the room to 2 people who had shared everything except what mattered most. Adrian looked at her, eyes dull from sleepless nights. Alina's gaze was crystal clear, terrifyingly so, as if she had stared into the void and come back carrying nothing with her. Why are you here? He asked, his voice no longer angry, just tired. Because I need an ending, she said. He let out a dry laugh, one that sounded like he no longer allowed himself to believe in anything. An ending. After torturing me for 8 months with that voice, after dragging me out of a dream only to throw me into another nightmare, you really think that was my intent? Lena asked, her voice barely a breeze. Adrian stood, slamming his hand on the chair. What do you know about loss? He nearly shouted. You weren't in the car. You didn't hear the scream. You didn't see the glass drive into my mother's hand. You didn't watch her die right in front of you. Silence. The whole room felt frozen. Alina didn't flinch, didn't turn away. She simply raised her hand and pulled back the sleeve of her left arm. Faint scars appeared, running from wrist to elbow, aged and faded, but still enough to mark someone who once wanted to disappear. I wasn't in the car, she said, her voice soft as mountain mist, but I was on a bridge railing, alone in the dark. No scream, no one to call my name. Adrian stilled. I lost my mother the same night yours died, Alina continued. I cared for you as a way to remember. I still existed, not to make you love me, but to remind myself how to love. I didn't tell stories so you'd be grateful I told them, because if I stayed silent, I'd hear my own mother's scream. She looked at him, then not with tears, but with the quiet light of someone who had chosen to live not for anyone else, for herself. I love you, Adrian, even if you don't love me, even if you never will. I still love you because it's the last thing I have left to choose. He couldn't hold it together anymore. No more blame, no more walls. He collapsed into the chair, face in his hands, and wept for the first time since waking up. Not for Alina, not for his mother, but for everything he had forced himself not to feel now crashing down like rain after drought. Alina stood. She didn't move toward him, didn't try to comfort him. She simply placed a folded note on the table, then turned to leave. "I lived once for you," she said. "Now I'll live again. But this time for me." The door closed quietly behind her. The room was left with the sound of his crying on the small piece of paper. Love isn't about holding on to someone. It's about having the courage to walk away when they no longer need you. A week after that final session in the therapy room, the hospital began preparing. Adrian Lancaster's discharge paperwork. He could walk, speak, eat normally, breathing stable, heart strong, no significant brain damage. But one thing remained broken. His mind, since the day Alina walked away without looking back. Adrian hadn't spoken her name, hadn't asked, hadn't searched, but each night as the hallway lights dimmed in silence, fell like a cold blanket, he lay wide awake, haunted by that voice. Not as torment from his coma, but as an aching absence. For the first time he feared the quiet Adrian sat on his hospital bed, a blank sheet of paper in front of him, pen resting in his hand. He wrote, then erased, wrote again, then tore it up, started over at last. The letter was done, just a single page, no embellishment, no excuses. Just words stripped bare, painful in their honesty for the first time. He meant everyone, Alina. I once thought your voice was a prison, an echo of some nameless fear. But now in its absence I understand you were what kept me alive. I wish I'd been strong enough to say this sooner. I wish I could learn to love that voice again with gratitude, with a heart unguarded. But maybe now it's too late. Adrian, he folded the letter, slipped it into an envelope. He didn't send it through the hospital, not through the doctor. Adrian left his room for the first time on his own, just to deliver it to the address Elena had once listed in her employee file, a small apartment near Central Park. There was no one home, just a rusted mailbox, paint peeling cold as the person it belonged to. He dropped the letter in and walked away that evening. Alina returned home after a volunteer shift at the mental health center. She'd begun filling her days with listening, not storytelling anymore, just being there for people who needed someone. She wasn't expecting anything in the mail, but when she opened the box, the letter was there like a whisper from the past, handwritten. Adrian's name. Her fingers trembled slightly. Alina opened the envelope. Read each word. She didn't cry, she didn't smile, she didn't fall into the trap of hope or regret. She just sat quietly, as if the letter were the final fragment of a chapter, long closed. I wish I could learn to love that voice again, but maybe now it's too late. Alina set the letter on her wooden table beside it, a lighter. She didn't hesitate. She didn't pause. A small flame flickered to life, curling around the paper, consuming each word. The page bent, shriveled, and crumbled into ash. Just one line she copied into her notebook. Written in deep blue ink, "Thank you for saying it, even if too late." She closed the journal carefully, like tucking treasured memory into a drawer. No one would open, but she wouldn't lose that night. Alina walked across the old bridge, the one where she had once stood, caught between life and letting go. Back then, no one had called her name, no one had held her back. Now, she was still alone, but she no longer needed anyone to hold her. She looked up at the sky, clear, unclouded, a single star emerging. Some love, she thought, isn't meant to be fulfilled. It's meant to show us who we are when there's nothing left but the truth. Time may heal wounds, but not all wounds leave scars. Some things once gone leave only the trace of a wind once fierce, now vanished, leaving behind nothing but a chill in the chest. When night falls, a year had passed. The city had changed seasons 3 times. Alina was no longer an ICU nurse. She had become a clinical lecturer and mental health program coordinator. The woman who once stood silently by a hospital bed now stood before a microphone, addressing a packed auditorium at the first International Medical Conference held after the pandemic. She stepped onto the stage in a white suit, hair neatly pinned, gaze steady. "I'm not here to talk about vitals," she began. "I'm here to talk about what makes someone choose to live again." And that she paused isn't medicine. It isn't miracles. It's connection. She spoke about speaking to comes patients, about how a voice can be a bridge between life and death. She never named anyone, but those who listened closely could feel it. She was telling her story, and the auditorium was silent. Every eye on her, every heart held still. Her final words weren't medical theory. but something deeply personal. Not everyone you save will remember you, but that doesn't make you smaller sometimes. Saving someone is how you save yourself. Thunderous applause. But Alina didn't look down. She didn't know, or chose not to know, that Adrian was sitting in the fourth row beside an elderly couple, quiet and alone, like a memory no one speaks of. He watched her the whole time. No notes, no glancing away. Just watching like someone trying to stitch a broken ear together with his gaze. After the program, Alina returned. Backstage, removed her mic, dabbed sweat from her brow. She was about to leave when her phone buzzed a message. No name and audio file, no subject. She hesitated, then pressed play for the first time. I hope this voice never stops. I know I listened to. Late, but if you ever tell stories again, I won't miss them this time. Adrian's voice low, steady, no apology, no pleading. Just a man who had learned to live with silence and was grateful when it was broken. Alina listened to the entire recording. They had ended on a single breath. No kiss, no promise, no love, no waiting. She smiled a smile that didn't appear in any conference.
Ow.
Photo, not the smile of someone accomplished, but of someone who had stopped hoping and still cherished what once was. She didn't reply, not out of anger, but because some answers, when they come too late, aren't meant to be returned in words, but in how one lives fully without. Waiting anymore, Alina stepped out from backstage. The evening had begun, sunlight bathed. The stone floor of the convention plaza golden, like the face of a memory stored away. She walked past Adrian without noticing, or perhaps she noticed but didn't stop. Adrian didn't call out. Just watched her go, no reaching, no hope, just a man once awakened by someone's voice, who had finally learned to honor the silence. She left behind music. Thank you for walking with Alina and Adrian, all the way to the final quiet notes of their story. Some loves don't need to end with an embrace or a kiss, but with the courage to let go, so both can grow freely in their own way. If this story touched you, leave a comment and share your thoughts. Have you ever been Alina or Adrian hit? Like, if you believe that loving someone sometimes means having the strength to walk away. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more emotional journeys where every pain is heard. Every heart has a chance to heal.